Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine for a second the absolute core of America's long-range kinetic power. I'm talking missiles, high-precision strike capability. But it's not sitting on some custom-built, multi-million-dollar, camouflaged armored vehicle. Instead, it's just sitting there, quietly, inside a plain, standard, maybe slightly rusty commercial shipping container. You know, a box you'd find stacked by the thousand at any major port, or on a train, or on the back of a truck on any highway in the world.
It really does sound like military doctrine that was written by, like, Amazon Logistics, doesn't it? But that's exactly the strategic necessity that's driving this really radical proposal. Today, we are diving deep into a white paper. It's called the Containerized Fires Brigade V1.0, and it's proposing nothing less than a complete redesign of how modern militaries project power. The core insight is almost absurdly simple when you get down to it. The heaviest, most expensive, most difficult part of the kinetic system shouldn't be the truck. It should be the payload inside a cheap, universally mobile box.
And our mission for this deep dive is to give you a fast, really thorough understanding of this concept. We're going to call it the Containerized Fires Brigade, or CFB for short. It's an approach that is explicitly designed to bypass what is probably the single greatest, most crippling limitation in modern warfare, which is the logistical bottleneck. The CSB is basically saying, let's move away from this cumbersome, heavy footprint of a traditional armored brigade, and let's embrace what the source material cheekily calls the Amazon Prime model for delivering military effects.
It is a fundamental paradigm shift. I mean, the whole premise of the paper is built on decoupling the shooter, the expensive, hard-to-maintain launch mechanism from the vehicle, the equally expensive, hard-to-transport chassis. Yeah. So by packaging the munitions and all the necessary launch hardware inside these standard ISO shipping containers, we're talking the ubiquitous 20-foot TEUs or the bigger 40-foot boxes, you suddenly make the entire system globally transportable. And you can do it on commercial, completely non-specialized infrastructure.
And the change to the organization is just, it's shocking. It's so lean. The source specifies that this transition takes what was once this heavy maneuver unit, needing thousands of soldiers and immense support infrastructure, and it transforms it into this hyper-lean staff of fewer than 300 people. And their job isn't to manage motor pools or fix engines. It's to manage a high-automation decision dominance network.
And that transition, it's rooted in a cultural revolution just as much as a technological one.
Huh?
In military logistics, assets get categorized. Class 7 items are what they call major end items, so things like tanks, ships, fighter jets, missile launchers. They're precious. They're tracked with this meticulous, painful precision, and losing one is a bureaucratic and financial trauma. The CFB concept demands that you treat the launch platform, the container itself, not as a precious Class 7 item, but as Class V, an expendable, a commodity, like ammunition or fuel.
That's the essential trade-off right there, isn't it? You use it, you expend it, and if you lose it, it's just treated as an expected, calculated cost of doing business. It's not some career-ending failure of command supply discipline. So we really need to explore what drove the strategists to this radical conclusion, because it implies the system we have now is, well, failing catastrophically at scale.
It is. The entire model is brittle.
Okay, so to really get the genius of the CFB, we first have to wrap our heads around the problem it's trying to solve. And the source material uses this really powerful image to define that weakness. It calls it the Iron Mountain.
The Iron Mountain. It's the perfect description of the logistical nightmare that faces any modern heavy fires element. It doesn't matter if it's a traditional fires brigade or, the kinetic arm of a new multi-domain command. It's just the sheer weight, the volume, the displacement of all the equipment required not just to fight, but just to exist in a theater of operations. Every single tracked or heavy-wheeled platform, whether we're talking about legacy MLRS or even the more modern HIMARS, it demands this huge specialized ecosystem.
And that ecosystem, that's not just the launcher. It's the dedicated vehicles for maintenance, the specific types of fuel, the specialized loading equipment, and, this is the most critical part, the specialized military transport assets you need just to get it into the fight in the first place.
Precisely. The unit is functionally tethered to that massive supporting ecosystem. It's like an anchor. And this prevents the agility, the rapid theater-wide distribution of effects that are absolutely essential in a potential large-scale combat operation, or LSCO. In short, the traditional unit is just too slow to react, it's too big to hide, and it's way too complex to sustain when your supply lines are being contested. The Iron Mountain isn't just the weight of the vehicles, it's the bureaucratic gravity that ties them all down.
And the biggest problem that comes from all this mass is what the paper calls the lift deficit. We just don't have enough planes. It's that simple, right?
We absolutely do not. The source material details this logistical bottleneck explicitly. I mean, they lay it out. To deploy just one standard vehicle-based fires brigade, you would require what the paper calls countless C-17 sorties, and that's just to move the launchers themselves. When you add in the required fuel tankers, the specialized maintenance vehicles, the command and control trucks, and all the gear for the hundreds of support personnel, you easily double the lift requirement. And the operational capacity needed to lift that much heavy specialized military equipment quickly, under pressure. It simply does not exist within the organic military airlift structure of the U.S. or its allies.
So that deficit, it directly undermines the entire strategy for a large-scale conflict. If you can't get your most decisive kinetic power into the fight quickly, you've already lost the initiative.
You've hit on the crucial point. The source calls this the kinetic bottleneck. Our forces are trying to transition toward multi-domain operations, which, promise these agile, distributed, high-volume effects across vast theaters. But if the physical thing that delivers those effects, the missile launcher, has to be transported by these heavy, specialized air assets, the entire strategy just collapses. It becomes a slow, predictable deployment that an adversary can easily detect, track, and target before you've even fired a shot.
And there's a historical reason for this, right? Why did we let ourselves get so reliant on systems with such a massive lift requirement?
Well, it's a hangover from the so-called peace dividend era. After the Cold War. For decades, Western militaries operated in pretty much uncontested environments. They assumed overwhelming technological superiority and unquestioned control of global logistics. We got used to the idea that we could always just muscle through any supply chain challenge using our own organic, specialized military assets. The sheer size and budget of the defense establishment would just prevail.
But the reality today is that those assets, the huge inventories of transport ships, the specialized rail cars, the big airlift fleets, they've been downsized, retired, or they're already dedicated to just maintaining our day-to-day global presence. So they aren't available for a rapid surge against a peer competitor.
Precisely. That historic, overwhelming organic transport capacity is gone. And on top of that, the traditional military channels for moving high-volume supplies, we're talking specifically about Class V, which is ammunition and explosives, they're built for slow, meticulous control, not speed. The movement of net explosive weight, or NEW, in the traditional model is too slow, too centralized, and it absolutely cannot sustain the rapid, high-volume expenditure of fire that a major peer conflict would demand.
So we're left with a strategic system that's built on three fundamental flaws. Specialized heavy vehicles, not enough specialized planes and ships to move them, and a logistics bureaucracy that's designed for control, not for speed.
Exactly. The traditional model prioritizes visibility and mass. You have these centralized, heavily protected ammunition supply points, or ASPs, that become enormous high-value targets. And the high cost associated with merely transporting that visible centralized mass is what creates this huge strategic vulnerability. The CFB white paper is the conceptual attempt to just entirely bypass the Iron Mountain and the kinetic bottleneck it imposes.
So if the problem is this heavy, specialized vehicle, this precious Class 7 item, then the radical elegance of the CFB solution is to standardize the weapon into the most common, most mass-produced transport vessel in the entire world, the shipping container.
Standardization is the absolute master key here. It unlocks everything. By designing the weapon system specifically to fit the dimensions of a standard 20-foot or 40-foot TEU, the CFB achieves instant universal mobility. This is the immediate game-changing benefit. And think about the cascade effect of that. You instantly remove the need for specialized military trucks, specialized military loaders, dedicated military maintenance facilities, and, crucially, specialized military airlift.
So if a container ship, a commercial railway car, or just a normal tractor trailer can handle a standard container, it can handle the CFB launch platform.
That's the whole calculation. You're leveraging a multi-trillion-dollar global logistics infrastructure that runs 24/7. When you think about a large-scale deployment, you're no longer relying on waiting for weeks in military logistics queues. You're just tapping into the civilian global distribution network. You're essentially moving the entire logistics overhead from a dedicated military cost center to an insured commercial partnership.
And this leads right to the core asymmetric advantage of the concept, which is stealth. Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the system is designed to use global commerce not just for transport, but for outright invisibility.
This anonymity factor is the CFB's strategic cornerstone. It's what makes it so dangerous. The weapon system achieves its operational security through aggregation, through blending in. It looks, it moves, and it's cataloged exactly like standard commercial freight until the very second It receives the command to activate and fire.
So the CFB is making a deliberate philosophical trade-off here. It's trading the heavy armor and the physical protection of a traditional launch system for sheer invisibility within the noisy, immense backdrop of global commercial flows.
Absolutely. Think about it from the adversary's point of view. Their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Their ISR apparatus. Their satellites and their analysts are looking for the distinctive, unique signatures of military equipment. Things like the thermal patterns of an operating engine, the specific dimensions of a missile launcher, the electromagnetic signatures of specialized military radio traffic, and, the physical presence of heavily armed military convoys.
But if they're looking at a rail yard or a port staging area with thousands and thousands of containers, how do they possibly differentiate a legitimate box of, I don't know, consumer goods from a containerized precision missile battery?
They can't. Or at least, they can't dedicate their limited, high-value intelligence assets to track every single one of them. It's an impossible task. The CFB exploits this necessary background noise. It turns the sheer volume of global commerce, millions of TEUs moving every single day, into operational camouflage. It's security through statistical anonymity.
And we mentioned modularity earlier. This also means that the CFB is inherently flexible in terms of the kinetic effect it delivers, right? It's not just a box for one type of missile.
That's correct. The container is purely the universally compatible form factor. It's the chassis. The force emphasizes that the internal payload module can be swapped out very easily at a secure depot. And this allows the CFB to be mission agnostic. That 40-foot container could be loaded with a whole stack of precision loitering munitions, which are ideal for suppressing forward air defenses. Or it could house a battery of medium-range precision strike missiles for hitting those really high payoff targets deep behind enemy lines.
Or on the flip side, it could be fully defensive.
Precisely. If the mission dictates, it can be outfitted with defensive interceptors. It could serve as a rapidly deployable distributed counter-UAS or counter-artillery shield. This capability allows the platform to be truly multi-domain, serving offensive and defensive fires needs equally just by swapping out the internal toolkit. And the speed of the containerized delivery system means you can change the entire kinetic posture of a theater faster than the adversary can possibly respond to a change in your mission requirements.
Okay, so moving from the physical box itself to the operational reality, the system creates a complete revolution in how we think about resupply and sustaining fire. The defining analogy the source uses is the printer and the ink cartridge, which highlights the most critical operational change, the total abandonment of reloading in the field.
This is maybe the largest psychological and physical break from traditional fires doctrine. It's huge. For the past 70 years, when a mobile artillery or missile system fired its payload, the next phase was this grueling, dangerous, and incredibly time-consuming process. You'd have soldiers moving heavy ammunition, often under the direct threat of counter-battery fire, painstakingly reloading the tubes one by one, manually. It could take hours, and they're doing it, as the military says, in the mud.
The CFB concept just bypasses that entire vulnerability by declaring the container itself to be the consumable unit.
You've nailed it. That's the crucial point. The entire container arrives fully loaded. It is both the launch system and the ammunition supply point combined into one. It executes its mission, it fires its full payload on command, and it just closes up. And the critical distinction is what they call the refresh cycle. Once it's expended, the container is immediately tagged, tracked, and returned to a secure rear echelon theater depot.
And crucially, the soldiers are not the ones doing the reloading.
That's right. The container is not reloaded by active duty soldiers in a forward, dangerous environment. It's rearmed by specialized contractor teams or dedicated allied support units, operating in a highly controlled, secure, and technologically advanced depot environment, far away from the front lines. Think of the F-35 analogy. Fighter jets aren't reloaded on the tarmac by general-purpose mechanics. They're rearmed by specialized teams in a protected zone using these highly defined, secure procedures. The CFB just adopts that high-efficiency model for ground-based fires.
So this frees up those highly trained, fewer than 300 military personnel to focus entirely on targeting, decision-making, and network health instead of manual labor.
Precisely. It maximizes the utilization rate of expensive, specialized military personnel by taking them out of low-value, high-risk physical tasks. Their job becomes command and control, not heavy lifting. The cost savings in training, protection, and operational risk are just immense.
This system also introduces a profound and, frankly, necessary change in how we manage net explosive weight, or NEW. We're trading a centralized high risk for a decentralized distributed risk.
The traditional military logistics model relied on these massive ammunition supply points, ASPS. These spots aggregate an enormous amount of NW in one single geographical location. An ASP is, by its very definition, a highly visible, high-payoff target for an adversary. A successful strike against an ASP can paralyze an entire theater of operations for days, maybe even weeks.
But the CFB solves this by making the risk invisible and spreading it out.
Exactly. The CFB concept replaces this centralized vulnerability with dispersion. So instead of one massive depot containing 10,000 tons of explosives, you have hundreds or even thousands of individual containers, each carrying a limited amount of NW, moving individually and anonymously through the commercial web. This minimizes the potential destructive impact of any single successful enemy strike. You're hardening the entire system by making the targets smaller, more numerous, and virtually impossible to track all at once.
And the safety implications of automating the handling of all this explosive material are pretty significant too, aren't they?
Absolutely. The source highlights the use of autonomous trucking and robotic loading systems during both the deployment and the refresh phases. And this is a crucial safety calculus change. Handling high explosive materials is inherently dangerous work. By using robotics and autonomous transport for the final mile delivery and the depot reloading process, you literally remove human beings from the immediate blast radius associated with handling the highest concentrations of NUW.
So it's not just about speed and efficiency, it's about institutionalizing safety through technology.
It is. When you automate munition handling, you are fundamentally changing the safety profile of the entire operation. You manage the risk from NUW not by relying solely on, distant separation between your personnel and the explosives, but through technological isolation. It emphasizes automated safety protocols and decentralized risk management over the traditional centralized manpower-heavy security approach.
Okay, so we've established that the CFB is the ultimate mobile launch platform, but a box of missiles is totally useless if you don't know what to shoot at fast enough. The CFB concept is revolutionary not just in how it moves the shooter, but in how it acquires targets. It turns the Fires Brigade into a transaction hub for validated targets, running a true, continuous 2004-7 battle rhythm.
This is where the concept really fully embraces the digital age. A traditional fires brigade is largely reliant on its own organic sensors, its own radars, its own counter-battery systems. It's inherently limited to what its immediate geographic footprint can see. The CFB, by contrast, operates more like a network router. It plugs into a global network targeting ecosystem with two distinct high-speed data streams, treating its core decision dominance network.
Let's start with Stream 1. The paper calls it the commercial targetry marketplace. This sounds like outsourcing high-level global intelligence to the private sector.
It is, and this is probably the most unique element of the whole proposal. The brigade leverages a global marketplace where targets are ingested from allied commercial constellations. And you have to think about the capabilities that private companies already deploy. Massive, all-weather satellite networks, high-resolution Earth imaging, global communications monitoring.
Yeah.
The source notes the implication that private entities are already maintaining constant custody and tracking of global entities, enemy assets, high-value infrastructure, you name it, during peacetime.
So instead of the military launching its own expensive specialized reconnaissance satellite, it just purchases the data it needs, when it needs it, through a secure API, an application programming interface.
That's exactly the transactional model. The brigade purchases these validated target packages almost like a broker on Wall Street buys a block of stock data. So, for instance, they might see a signature that was detected by synthetic aperture radar SAR, which, for the listener, is basically the high-resolution all-weather X-ray vision we can buy commercially now. And the SAR imagery shows a mobile missile launcher exiting a hardened site somewhere.
And the target packet isn't just an image, right? It has to be a comprehensive, actionable file.
It has to be. The data specificity includes all-weather SAR, detailed radio frequency or RF signal mapping that shows communications hubs, and high-resolution infrared monitoring showing recent operational activity. The brigade purchases this intelligence, validates it against other streams, and then it owns that targeting data. You're essentially outsourcing the high-cost, continuous global surveillance effort to commercial partners and simply buying the actionable intelligence package when the target is hot and validated.
Which brings us to Stream 2, the tactical edge. This is how they integrate the forward elements on the ground.
These forward battalions are fundamentally redefined in this model. They're no longer just maneuver or defensive units. They are transformed into these sophisticated C5ISR hubs. That's command, control, communications, computers, cyber defense, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They are, in essence, mobile data processing centers operating as close to the enemy as possible.
And they use something called edge compute filtering to handle the immense data load. What does that mean?
It means that the data volume at the tactical edge is just overwhelming. If you try to set all that raw sensor data back to a central hub for processing, you create latency and bottlenecks. You're too slow. So each battalion hosts its own organic clusters of blade servers, basically high-powered computing capacity right there on the edge. And these servers locally fuse massive amounts of sensor data from small drones, from ground sensors, from signals intelligence systems, and they filter out the noise, identify patterns, and rapidly validate high payoff targets right where the action is happening.
So the local units do the heavy lifting on the processing, but they only push the data up to the CFB for execution if the target is deemed strategically important.
Precisely. This is managed through an automatic JIPTL injection. JIPTL stands for the Joint Integrated Prioritized Target List. This is basically the master to-do list for every shooter in the theater, and it ranks targets by their strategic value. So if a forward element identifies a critical target that exceeds its own organic lethality, say a fortified enemy headquarters or a major air defense complex, and that target is critical to the JIPTL, the validated data packet is automatically sent to the CFB for execution. This creates a seamlessly integrated high-speed sensor-to-shooter loop that's managed almost entirely by automated systems.
And this leads us directly to the most complex, high-stakes decision in the whole process, the legal oversight. Because speed is paramount, the human element can't always intervene in time. This is why the source details the requirement for what it calls the automated JAG, or a constitutional AI.
This is the critical safeguard. It has to be institutionalized before a system like this is ever operationalized. Before any launch sequence can proceed, the system requires this constitutional AI layer to run a full automated review of the target packet. The AI's function is to act as an automated judge advocate general, or JAG-E.
Okay, what exactly is this AI analyzing in milliseconds that a human JAG would traditionally take minutes, maybe even hours to do?
So the AI is rigorously cross-referencing all the available targeting data against the foundational requirements of international humanitarian law, or IHL. The IHL criteria the AI has to certify are typically threefold: distinction, necessity, and proportionality.
Let's break those down in the context of what this AI is actually doing.
Okay, first, distinction. The AI has to analyze the target imagery, the RF signatures, the movement patterns, everything, to certify with a very high degree of confidence that the target is a valid military objective and not a protected civilian site. It's running sophisticated object recognition and pattern analysis to ensure the target is distinct from non-combatants or protected infrastructure like hospitals or schools.
Okay, that makes sense. Second, necessity.
Right. So the AI reviews the context provided by the JIPTL and all the sensor fusion data to confirm that the strike is required to achieve a legitimate military purpose, and that the target's destruction offers a clear military advantage. It also has to verify that the targeting data is fresh and the asset is still active and a threat.
And third, probably the hardest one to quantify, proportionality.
This is where the computational power is absolutely essential. The AI has to calculate the predicted collateral damage and weigh it against the anticipated military advantage you'd gain from the strike. It runs these complex damage models based on the chosen munition type against the surrounding environment, civilian buildings, historical sites, and so on, and it ensures the expected incidental harm is not excessive in relation to the concrete and direct military advantage you anticipate.
So the human commanders set the rules of engagement and the parameters for acceptable collateral damage beforehand, but the AI is enforcing those rules in real time. What happens if the confidence interval for the AI's IHL review is too low? Say the SAR imagery is degraded or the location is just too close to a known protected site.
If the constitutional AI cannot certify IHL compliance with a predetermined high-confidence threshold, the launch sequence is automatically suspended. It just stops. The target packet would be flagged and immediately rerouted to a human command authority for a manual, minutes-long review. But the entire goal is to institutionalize that legal check into the automated process itself. This allows the majority of clearly defined, high payoff targets to be struck with incredible speed while still maintaining legal adherence. It's really the only way you can merge the speed of commercial data with the absolute necessity of ethical engagement.
Okay, the moment you start moving lethal kinetic power through civilian networks, railways, shipping companies, ports, you step directly into this massive security gray zone.
Hmm.
The question isn't just one of logistics anymore, it's one of security and law. So how do you protect lethal cargo when you've intentionally given up the traditional reliance on armed guards and military escorts for that middle mile of transport?
You start by accepting the premise that relying on government-owned transportation for the middle mile, that long haul between the port of entry and the dispersed operating areas, is fundamentally incompatible with the scale and speed you need for LSCO. You simply cannot generate the necessary volume and distribution if you rely exclusively on organic military assets. It's impossible. Therefore, you must leverage the existing high-capacity global infrastructure of shipping conglomerates and rail authorities.
Which means we have to be really clear about who knows what's inside the box. The paper talks about witting partners and unwitting layers.
That distinction is crucial, both legally and operationally. The witting layer is the logistics prime. It's the major shipping line, the rail authority, or the trusted host nation transportation partner. They are cleared, they are contractually obligated, and they are fully aware that they are moving high-security, high-hazard class freight. They have systems in place, GPS tracking, secure seals, bonded yards that meet the contractually required security standards.
But the operational effectiveness, the stealth, relies on that second group, the unwitting layer, which provides the anonymity.
Exactly. To an adversary's surveillance, or even to a customs agent or just a casual observer, the container has to remain completely indistinguishable from the millions of other TEUs carrying standard commercial goods. This is what maintains the visual anonymity, which is the system's core protection. The security comes not from hardening the container against a direct military strike, but from hiding it in plain sight within the noise of global commerce.
Now, this leads directly to a vital legal distinction that the source paper is very careful to address, the difference between digital obfuscation and perfidy.
Yes, and this is a critical legal minefield. Perfidy, under the law of armed conflict, is the act of actively feigning protected or civilian status to gain an unfair military advantage. For instance, using a recognized Red Cross emblem to shield a fighting position. That's a war crime. The CFB concept explicitly avoids advocating for perfidy. You can't put a container full of missiles next to a stack of humanitarian aid and call it protected.
So, if they aren't actively lying about the container's function, how do they maintain the secrecy?
They rely on digital compartmentalization. The physical container bears generic but truthful markings. It might be labeled general freight, or carry a standard hazard classification that's relevant to the explosive materials inside the launchers. It is not marked as a military asset. The lethal nature, the precise internal components, and the operational activation protocol are all hidden behind the secure API layer and known only to the witting control tower. So the deception isn't a physical camouflage or illegal deception. It's a sophisticated digital obfuscation of the specific end-use data.
And this allows the military to maintain its ethical and legal standing while still gaining the benefit of commercial stealth.
It's threading a very fine needle. You're taking advantage of the commercial volume without actively misrepresenting the nature of the cargo to gain an unfair legal advantage. You are simply leveraging the commercial default state, which is anonymity, while securing the controlled data digitally.
So now we get to what might be the most profound philosophical shift in security. Moving from positive control to what the paper calls actuarial security, or buying down risk.
Traditional military logistics is absolutely obsessed with positive control. This means every single item, particularly the high-value ones, requires constant documented surveillance, armed guards, meticulous physical security, and these complex chain of custody forms. It's an approach that is bureaucratic, slow, and logistically crippling at scale.
So the CFB proposal is essentially telling the military to stop acting like a logistics bureaucracy and start acting like an insurance company.
Exactly. It replaces that obsession with guaranteed positive control with a commercial risk management approach based on actuarial tables. If the military has to move a container payload that's valued at, say, $5 million, they move it using bonded, high-security commercial carriers that are insured for that exact amount. The assumption of loss is baked right into the operating budget.
So, if a container is lost, whether it's to theft, an accident, or even enemy action, it's not a logistical catastrophe that triggers a massive investigation and a career-ending failure.
No. That loss is covered by insurance and commercial bonding agreements. The financial risk is transferred entirely to the commercial market. The cost of that loss, the insurance line item, is just a calculated operating expense. And the critical point is that the operational speed and resilience you gain through dispersion and commercial scalability vastly outweigh the cost of a statistically inevitable loss.
So the ultimate goal then is to remove the bureaucratic burden of micromanaging physical assets from the fighting force.
The focus shifts entirely. It moves to generating military effects and managing the data in a contractual flow, not filling out paperwork for physical chain of custody. By accepting statistical risk, you free commanders to employ these assets aggressively, widely, and rapidly. You're optimizing for operational effect rather than asset preservation. It's a fundamental trade-off of bureaucracy for agility.
All these changes, the container form factor, the commercial logistics, the AI targeting, they all culminate in this radical reimagining of the military unit itself. The source mandates a maximum cap of fewer than 300 personnel for the entire Containerized Fires Brigade headquarters, which just seems impossibly small.
That small staff size is the ultimate proof of concept for the underlying automation. It's the result of all that other work. A traditional brigade headquarters requires huge teams just to manage motor pools, maintenance bays, administrative offices, physical supply points, and all the security forces that go with them. The CFB staff does none of that high-overhead physical labor.
Okay, so if they aren't managing trucks and mechanics, what are these 300 highly specialized people actually doing? What's their day-to-day?
Their function is entirely cognitive and contractual. They manage three core areas: data flow, contracts, and effects generation. Their primary focus is on maintaining the health and security of the digital mesh network, managing the targeting API transactions with commercial partners, ensuring IHL compliance via the constitutional AI, and overseeing the complex commercial logistics contracts that govern the rapid, insured flow of containers.
It sounds less like a traditional military unit and more like a high-tech logistics and data fusion startup.
It really is. High levels of systems automation and AI are managing all the low-level functions: tracking inventory flow, optimizing delivery routes to avoid choke points, coordinating the robotic movements at the secure depots. The humans are there for the complex, high-stakes decisions and the strategic management of third-party risk.
And this requires that major cultural overhaul we touched on at the beginning, specifically the commodity mindset.
This is probably the hardest shift to make. For decades, the military has promoted a culture where losing a piece of expensive, high-value equipment, a Class 7 item, was seen as a profound, often career-ending failure of command supply discipline. The institutional focus was asset preservation above all else.
But the CFB has to completely reframe what constitutes an acceptable loss.
It must. The staff has to view these containerized launchers as Class V, as expendable commodities. Losing a container is integrated as a calculated cost of war. It's a line item in the insurance ledger, not a failure of command accountability. And this mindset is what frees commanders to employ the assets aggressively, disperse them widely, and accept tactical losses if they yield greater strategic operational effects.
So what does this small, flexible footprint mean for the overall resilience of the command structure itself?
It creates inherent survivability. The staff is focused on decision dominance, operating a 24/7 battle rhythm, but they don't all need to be co-located or physically exposed near the front lines, which would create a massive single target for an adversary. The structure allows the core staff to be distributed between a very lean, forward command post that only handles immediate tactical communication and a remote sanctuary location.
A sanctuary location that could be thousands of miles away from the fight.
Exactly. It could be in the continental United States CONUS or in a secure rear area allied facility. This geographic dispersion means that a targeted attack on the command structure becomes virtually impossible without striking allied territory or secure military bases far from the actual conflict. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the CFD trades the physical size and vulnerability of a traditional unit for digital security and financial agility, creating a command structure that is profoundly more resilient to modern long-range targeting.
This deep dive into the Containerized Fires Brigade V1.0 white paper really reveals a dual, simultaneous modernization effort. First, modernizing the delivery method by leveraging the entire global commercial container infrastructure. And second, modernizing the source of targeting and decision-making by integrating AI and commercial satellite and sensor networks.
The core conclusion is that the CFB concept solves the most critical, almost existential problems of scale and target acquisition at the same time. The logistical system we built during the peace dividend, that reliance on overwhelming organic military assets, is obsolete. It's broken. By shifting to a containerized model, you achieve massive scalability and rapid deployment. And by integrating commercial data streams, edge compute, and constitutional AI, you gain speed and unparalleled resilience in the kill chain.
It really is the ultimate logistical trade-off. The entire shift means trading the illusion of positive control, that slow, heavily bureaucratic, physically secured oversight, for the reality of statistical survivability. And that's achieved through mass dispersion, blistering speed, commercial risk transfer via insurance, and robust financial backing.
And this convergence forces a monumental question on all of us. If the true limiting factor in modern conflict is no longer kinetic power itself, but the logistical and legal infrastructure needed to support that power, then what happens when commercial markets, global insurance carriers, massive shipping conglomerates, and private satellite data providers become the indispensable, institutionalized engine of national defense?
The CFB proposes institutionalizing the Amazon Prime model for lethal delivery, and the long-term strategic impacts of making commercial supply chains the very backbone of military power are, I think, only just beginning to unfold. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.